In 1992, a young couple traveled from Tennessee to Georgia to sell computer equipment in what they believed was a legitimate business deal. Instead, they walked into a trap. The buyer, using a false name, lured them to a motel room where he robbed them, then brutally attacked both with a hammer. The woman died from her injuries, while the man survived but was left with lasting trauma. Despite a composite sketch and witness accounts, the killer was never identified. Years later, a suspect emerged who had committed a similar double murder in a motel, but police never believed he was the suspect. The case remains unsolved, clouded by speculation, unanswered questions, and theories involving possible accomplices and connections between the victims and the suspect. Welcome to Without a Trace. I'm your host, Jolynn. Every file holds a mystery. Every story deserves to be heard. This is Tom's story. Heather Uffelman was born on December 17, 1969 in Erin, Tennessee. She was the youngest of 6 children born to Osman and Helen Uffelman. Heather always loved writing and was active in the Media and Entertainment College and the English department at the Middle Tennessee State University. She was a tutor for the university's Development Writing Lab and an employee of the radio station. Heather planned to attend graduate school following her scheduled completion of her undergraduate degree in the spring of 1969. Jeremy Rolfs was born on January 28, 1970, to Dan and Alma Rolfs. Jeremy was a very passionate person. From a young age, he threw himself wholeheartedly into whatever was important to him at the time. He was especially enthusiastic about science and technology, social justice, animals, music, film, and documentaries. Jeremy was a senior at Middle Tennessee State University. He switched majors from recording engineering to mass communications. He was heavily involved in the campus television station, developing a news program that addressed often controversial campus issues. Heather and Jeremy met in the early 1990s at the Middle Tennessee State University. They both worked at the student television station, where he was a station manager. The two eventually became engaged and were planning to get married in the summer of 1993. Jeremy worked part-time in Nashville, working as a videotape editor for a music company. His employer, Sherman Halsey, tasked him with placing an ad in the classified section to sell the central processing unit and monitor for an Apple Quadra 950. On October 7, 1992, Jeremy was contacted by a man calling himself Tom Johnson, who claimed that he worked as a freelance computer programmer and database consultant. They soon met at Jeremy's office so he could perform a demonstration with the computer equipment. The two men agreed on a selling price of $31,000, and Tom requested that the equipment be delivered to his office in Marietta, Georgia. However, he soon changed his mind and told Jeremy that since his office was located in an industrial park, the directions to get there were complicated. So he asked if they could complete the transaction at a local motel on the morning of October 24th. Since Marietta was over 200 miles away, Jeremy would have to leave his home at 1:30 a.m. and drive all night. By that point, Jeremy was exhausted after working about 30 hours on another project. He invited Heather because they enjoyed taking trips together. She was also concerned that he would fall asleep while driving if he went by himself. After driving all night, they arrived at the Knights Inn Motel in Marietta, Georgia at 7:30 a.m. They met with Tom in his room, who told them that he was waiting for his business partner to arrive with a certified check for the amount of $31,000. But since they would not show up for another half an hour, Heather and Jeremy went out for breakfast. They returned to Tom's room around 8 a.m., and he told them his business partner had just called and would be arriving shortly. While they waited, Tom suggested they load the computer equipment into his Dodge Dynasty, which Jeremy noticed had Tennessee plates. After the equipment was transferred into the car, Jeremy and Heather spent the next 20 minutes making small talk with Tom inside his room. When the business partner failed to show up, Jeremy started expressing his impatience and suggested that Tom go to the office and bring his partner along so the deal could be closed. Tom then pulled out a small handgun and said, "I think we can close this deal right now." He made Jeremy hand over his money belt and had Heather lay the bedsheets on the floor. He made Jeremy wrap himself up in one and Heather do the same in the other. He then said that he would take the computer and Jeremy's company would get an insurance check. Tom also said that everyone would be fine. However, just seconds later, he struck Jeremy in the head with a hammer. Jeremy felt a buzzing in his ear and saw the room spin. Tom then went to Heather and struck her in the head too. As she screamed, he continued to hit her. When Jeremy said, "Stop screaming and he'll leave," Tom came back and hit him again. He then went back and hit Heather several more times as well. Tom then backed out of the motel to leave. As he did so, he dusted the countertop, presumably to remove his fingerprints. After he left, Jeremy crawled out over to check on Heather and saw that she was badly beaten. He told her that he was going to go get help. At 9:30 a.m., a motel employee found Jeremy wandering around, disoriented and bleeding. He and Heather were soon rushed to a nearby hospital. 2 hours later, Heather succumbed to her massive skull injuries. Jeremy recovered and was released on October 27th. However, he suffered from vertigo, hearing loss, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Meanwhile, the authorities questioned witnesses and searched the motel room for evidence. Among the few clues that Tom left behind was the murder weapon, a hammer still wrapped in plastic. Though the hammer had clearly been recently purchased, authorities were unable to trace which store it was purchased in. While Jeremy was able to provide the serial numbers for the stolen central processing unit and monitor, the equipment never showed up in circulation. Authorities noted that the robbery was unusual since Tom allowed himself to be seen in public during the day. They also thought it was unusual that he had a handgun with him but did not use it to kill his victims. They soon learned of yet another curious circumstance that occurred approximately an hour before the attack. Sometime between 7:30 and 8 a.m., an unknown woman had complained to the front desk clerk that there was a lot of noise coming from Tom's room, claiming that it sounded urgent. Sadly, nothing was done about the complaint. At that time, Jeremy and Heather had been gone for breakfast. Authorities now believe that the woman may have been an accomplice of Tom's who attempted to sabotage the scheme once she learned that he intended to murder his victims. They hoped that she or anyone else at the motel would come forward with more information about Tom or his car. They also hoped to hear from anyone that had information on the stolen computer. Jeremy described Tom as being a clean-cut man in his late 20s or early 30s. A composite sketch of the murderer was made and was handed out, but it yielded no leads. Jeremy remembered that the car Tom was driving had Tennessee license plates, suggesting that the murderer was local, but he could not recall any other details about the vehicle. Detectives looked into all local men named Tom Johnson who had a criminal record and then beyond, and they also looked into the employees from an office building near the motel, but none of them matched the description and most of them had alibis. The trail went cold until May 1994 when a promising suspect popped up on the radar, Tom Steeples. The 49-year-old owner of a Nashville computer supply stores had committed a double murder in a motel room in April 1994 that was eerily similar to the attack on Jeremy and Heather. In that case, he brought a young couple named Rob and Kelly Phillips to the motel with the promise of a record deal. He raped Kelly, then beat the couple to death, taking off with their money. At the time, Steeples was already out on bond, having been charged with the murder of a man named Ronald Bingham, who was shot to death inside his club in October 1993 before the perpetrator set fire to the place to destroy evidence. Steeples was a heavy drug user and had a serious gambling habit, and likely murdered Ronald to avoid paying a debt. While awaiting trial for the Phillips murders, Steeples was found dead in his jail cell. It turned out that his wife, Tilly, had smuggled a large amount of cocaine to him so he could commit suicide by overdosing. Tilly would later receive a 6-year prison sentence for her role in his death. Given the similarities between the two crimes, there was suspicion that Steeples might have been the mysterious Tom Johnson. Before Steeples died, Jeremy requested to see his photograph, but the Marietta Police Department would not provide one, claiming they could only show Jeremy a photo lineup if it contained a picture of someone who was a suspect in the case, and they did not consider Steeples to be one at that time. It has been noted that Steeples closely resembled the composite sketch of Tom Johnson and matches his physical description. Jeremy later joined the Peace Corps as a telecommunications advisor. Tragically, he was killed in a car accident in South Africa on March 31, 1997. He was hit head-on by a driver who had reportedly fallen asleep at the wheel. Heather's family believes Jeremy held the key to the mystery all along. At various times, publicly available records listed a Jeremy Rolfs with the same birth date and addresses in Oak Park and Chicago, Illinois. One address was an 8-mile drive from a residence listed in the same public directories for Tom Steeples, who originally hailed from Oak Park. Another later address for Jeremy was just 4 miles from the former Steeples address. Some believe Jeremy and Tom Steeples cooked up a scheme to profit off the computers together. After Heather was murdered, Jeremy essentially hid out for a time, saying he was under police protection because the killer was still at large. Then, there are other stray details that make it more plausible that Tom Johnson was Tom Steeples. For example, a mysterious woman complained about noise from a hotel room used by Johnson at the Knights Inn where the murder occurred. A female accomplice helping Tom Johnson would fit with the toxic but codependent dynamic between Steeples and his wife Tilly. Still, internet sleuths have pointed out several aspects of the case that never made sense, like the fact that Jeremy was a part-time employee, yet he was willing to make the roughly 230-mile drive from Nashville to Atlanta to sell the computer for $30,000. Additionally, 2 of these computers in 1992 would have sold for maybe $15,000, and used ones even less. If the sellers were charging $30,000, they were drastically overcharging, and if the killer knew computers, he understood that. Tom Johnson has never been identified or apprehended. Police have put out a nationwide lookout on the suspect, but have not been able to locate him. Thank you for listening to Without a Trace. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive into Tom's disappearance. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and follow Without a Trace on social media. And join me next week as I dive into another case.